Something is out there in the willows, something that has no name in any language you know, and no face you could survive seeing. Welcome back to the vault. I am the warden. Tonight I have unlocked a transmission that predates the horror you think you know. The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, published in 1907. 15 years before Lovecraft wrote a single word that mattered. Howard Phillips Lovecraft himself, a man not given to easy admiration, called this story the finest supernatural tale in the English language. I am inclined to agree. The reason you have not heard it discussed in that way is precisely the reason I chose to unlock it tonight. This is not the horror of monsters. This is not the horror of ghosts. This is the horror of forces so vast and so indifferent that the concept of malice does not apply. They do not wish you harm. They do not wish you anything. You have simply wandered into a place that does not belong to your kind and been noticed. Blackwood wrote this in the Edwardian summer of 1907, at the height of his powers and at the height of an age that still believed, just barely, that the world was a known and manageable thing. He had traveled the Danube himself, canoed its waters, camped on its islands. What he found there, between Vienna and Budapest, in that desolate swamp of willows that even the maps refused to name properly, he brought back with him and encoded in this story. I am not entirely sure he left all of it behind. Picture the Danube in flood, mid-July, water swollen and yellow with silt, moving at 12 kilometers an hour, and taking anything in its path with it. The great willows that line the river's islands do not grow tall. They have no trunks to speak of. They are low and they are endless, and they move with the wind in such constant, restless motion that they give the impression, to those with the imagination to notice, that the entire plain is alive, that it is watching, that it has been watching for a very long time. Men have made the mistake of camping there for the night. The door is open. The willows are already moving. Begin. After leaving Vienna, and long before you reach Budapest, the Danube enters a region of singular loneliness and desolation, where its waters spread away on all sides, regardless of a main channel, and the country becomes a swamp for miles upon miles, covered by a vast sea of low willow bushes. On the big maps, this deserted area is painted in a fluffy blue, and across it may be seen in large, straggling letters the single word Sumpfa, meaning marshes. These willows never attain to the dignity of trees. They have no rigid trunks. They remain humble bushes, swaying on slender stems that answer to the least pressure of the wind, supple as grasses, and so continually shifting that they somehow give the impression that the entire plain is moving and alive. For the wind sends waves rising and falling over the whole surface, waves of leaves instead of waves of water, until the branches turn and lift, and then silvery white as their underside catches the sun. We, in our Canadian canoe, reached this wilderness on the crest of a rising flood about mid-July. We had slipped swiftly through still sleeping Vienna that morning, swept on the tearing current past the old Roman Carnuntum and under the frowning heights of Thelsen, and then plunged on yellow foam into the land of the willows. The change came suddenly. In less than half an hour, there was neither boat nor fishing hut, nor any single sign of human habitation within sight. The sense of remoteness from the world of humankind, the utter isolation, it instantly laid its spell upon us both, so that we allowed to one another that we had come without asking leave into a separate little kingdom, a kingdom reserved for the use of others who had a right to it, with everywhere unwritten warnings to trespassers for those who had the imagination to discover them.
The wind made landing difficult. The willow branches tore our hands as we seized them, but at length we managed to beach the bows in a cloud of spray and lay panting on the hot yellow sand, sheltered from the wind, the full blaze of a scorching sun overhead. The willows closed in from all sides, shining with spray and clapping their 1,000 little hands as though to applaud the success of our efforts. My companion, a Swede, cool-tempered and experienced, found a suitable camp and composed himself for a nap, seemingly untroubled by the gathering sense I had already begun to feel, that we were not entirely alone here, that something beyond the wind moved among those restless silver-gray shapes.
My companion was one of those invaluable persons who combine the knowledge of the dreamer with the practical ability of the businessman. I never met anyone more simple and straightforward, nor yet with such a capacity for experience on another plane of consciousness altogether. When I mentioned the uncanny feeling that the place inspired, he merely laughed. We had made many canoe journeys together, and I had never known the Danube affect me like this before. There was something about the willows, the way they moved when the wind died, the way they seemed to press in toward the bank, that unsettled me in ways I could not articulate. That evening, while the Swede was cooking, I watched a man in a boat go past us rapidly downstream. He was paddling with tremendous urgency, not with the casual effort of a man going home, but with the desperate energy of someone running from something. He passed so swiftly that I barely had time to wave. He did not wave back. He did not even look up. He kept his eyes on the water ahead of him and was gone into the willows before I could call out. And then, just before the twilight settled, something large moved in the shallows near the bank, something that, in the fading light, seemed too large to be the otter the Swede later supposed it to be. It had yellow eyes. I did not mention the eyes. Night came down without ceremony. The fire was good, and the Swede's cooking was better than usual. And for a time, the warmth drove back what I had been feeling all afternoon. We talked of Vienna and the days ahead on the river and the sea. But when conversation thinned and the fire began to sink, the sounds came back. The roaring of the wind in the willows, the thunder of the river, and beneath both, barely audible, yet somehow more present than either, a note I could not name. A vibration rather than a sound, humming in the base of the chest. The Swede heard it too, I think. He stopped talking in the middle of a sentence and looked out past the firelight with an expression I did not like. We turned in at last to the small tent, side by side upon our sandy mattresses. I told myself it was nothing but the wind. I told myself the place was merely strange, as any wild and remote place is strange. I lay still and listened, and told myself these things for a long time. And then I woke, bolt upright, past midnight, with the moon bright on the canvas and the river roaring, and looked out through the flap of the tent at the tops of the willows. Cold,
Suddenly I was kneeling, fully awake, and staring. The willows were swaying violently, but there was something among them, above them, shapes of some indeterminate sort that moved independently of the branches, immense, bronze-colored, rising. Not leaves, not shadows, not the tricks of moonlight on moving foliage. Something wholly independent of the swaying of the branches.
They first became properly visible just within the tops of the bushes. Immense, bronze-colored, moving shapes, larger than human, and indeed proclaiming themselves with every line and curve to be not human at all. They rose upwards in a continuous stream from earth to sky, vanishing utterly as soon as they reached the dark of the upper air. They were interlaced one with another, making a great column, their limbs and huge bodies melting in and out of each other, forming a serpentine line that bent and swayed and twisted spirally with the contortions of the wind-tossed trees. Their faces I never could see. Far from feeling fear, I was possessed with a sense of awe and wonder, such as I have never known. I seemed to be gazing at the personified elemental forces of this haunted and primeval region. Our intrusion had stirred the powers of the place into activity. It was we who were the cause of the disturbance, and my brain filled to bursting with stories and legends of the spirits and deities of places, acknowledged and worshipped by men in all ages of the world's history. For a long time, I thought they must every moment disappear and resolve themselves into the movements of the branches and prove to be illusion. But the longer I looked, the more certain I became that they were real and living, though perhaps not according to the standards that the camera or the biologist would insist upon. Then suddenly they were gone, and once they were gone and the wonder of their great presence had passed, fear came down upon me with a cold rush. The esoteric meaning of this lonely and haunted region suddenly flamed up within me, and I began to tremble. I took a quick look round, a look of horror that came near to panic, then crept back silently into the tent and lay down upon my mattress, lowering the door curtain to shut out the sight of the willows in the moonlight. But sleep, when it finally came, did not last. I woke the second time to a sound of multitudinous little patterings, small, dry, rapid, coming from all sides of the tent at once. They had been approaching, I was aware, for some time, and in my sleep they had first become audible. There was a great weight upon the surface of the canvas. I felt clammy with cold and shivered. Something was pressing steadily against the sides of the tent and weighing down upon it from above. I raised the flap and rushed out. The tent was free. There was no branch, no rain, nothing approaching. But when I climbed to the highest point of the island and looked down at our little camp below, a dreadful discovery leaped out at me, compared to which my terror of the ascending figures seemed as nothing at all. The willows had moved, not the swaying of branches, not the trick of dawn light. The distance I had measured, I remembered it precisely. The distance between the outermost bushes and the tent had closed. The willows had crept nearer during the night, silently, on feet that left no mark in the sand. And the knowledge that followed immediately from this observation was perhaps the most terrible thing of all. It was not through our bodies that the attack would come. It was through our minds with a door. And the willows were already at it. I returned to the tent as the sun rose. My companions still slept. I was glad. I was not ready to say aloud what I had seen, for saying it would make it real, and I was not entirely sure I wished it to be real. Not yet. Not here, with the river rising and the willows pressing in from every side, and the canoe, our only means of escape, resting, innocent and unknowing, in the sand below. I did not know then that the canoe had already been touched. The door to the vault is beginning to close, but it will not shut entirely. Not yet. What waits on the other side of that island night is worse than what you have already seen. Part 2 of The Willows unlocks soon. Subscribe to the vault so you are present when I open it. What the Swede found at the canoe, what the island prepared for them, what or who the Willows finally selected as their offering. Until then, stay in the dark.